Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unworthy History. Today we got some more actual history for you from this book right here, Indian Depredations in Texas by J.W. Wilbarger, published all the way back in 1889. Now today's story is another one that took place in Young County, Texas. It's called The Heroic Defense of the Dillard Brothers. We are indebted to Colonel E.S. Graham for the following account of the heroic defense of two beardless youths, Henry and Willie Dillard, against 30 Comanche warriors. Early in the autumn of 1869, I arrived in Texas from Louisville, Kentucky, accompanied by two young men, Dillard and Durrell, who wished to see Texas and the Wild West generally. Late in the following spring I returned to Kentucky, leaving these young men in Texas to improve a place yet known as Fort Davis on the Clear Fork of the Brazos River, about 8 miles below Fort Griffin. In 1872, Dillard planted on an abandoned farm, mostly in watermelons, on the west side of the Brazos River, about 4 miles above Belknap in Young County. He had written to me previously that he was very anxious to have his brother Willie with him, a lad of about 11 years old, who was then in Kentucky. I therefore furnished Willie with tickets to Fort Worth, and gave such directions as would enable him to reach that place, and from thence to Fort Griffin via Belknap. He arrived safely at Henry's lonely abode, and shortly afterwards they went to Fort Griffin with a 2-horse wagon loaded with watermelons, which they disposed of at from 50 cents to $1.50 each. On their way home, and when about 16 miles from Fort Griffin, Henry was aroused from a slumber into which he had fallen by Willie exclaiming, "Brother Henry, the Indians have got us!" Henry quickly looked up and discovered about 30 mounted Indians ahead of them in the road, painted and in full war costume. He instantly seized his repeating rifle, jumped from the wagon, and told Willie to follow him. After running a short distance, Henry halted and, turning, fired upon the foremost Indians, but without any effect except to check temporarily their approach. Taking advantage of this, the boys ran on in the direction of some timber upon a creek, until they were compelled to halt again and confront their pursuers. Again Henry fired his rifle, and as before, without any effect except to retard their advance for a moment. But just as he was in the act of firing the third time, as he told me subsequently, the advice I had frequently given to Durrell and himself in our travels came to mind. In a fight with mounted Indians, always aim low, as in doing so they are unable to ward off the shot with their shields, at which they are exceedingly expert, and you will be sure to hit either the rider or his horse, and a dismounted warrior is already half-whipped. Following my advice, he aimed low the third time, and at the report of the rifle both the horse and the rider fell to the ground. Seeing their comrade fall, the Indians gave a terrible yell and rushed upon the boys. Soon Willie's piercing shriek, "Oh, brother Henry!" caused him to turn round, and he discovered an Indian warrior just in the act of lifting Willie upon his horse. Raising his gun quickly, he fired, and dropped him dead from his horse. This again checked the Indians momentarily, and the boys once more made for the timber as fast as they could go. But when about 20 paces from the point of timber they were endeavoring to reach, Henry stumbled and fell. But quickly regaining his feet, he turned and shot one of the foremost warriors, who with scalping knife in hand was in the act of dismounting, thinking no doubt that Henry was killed or wounded. In another moment the boys reached the timber, and this unequal contest came to an end, for the Indians had been so roughly handled they dared not follow them further. The boys came out of it without a scratch. This band of Indians, on their return to Fort Sill, reported that they had had a fight with a big captain and his little boy, and that their medicine was too strong for them. When night came, the brothers went to the nearest ranch. There they obtained horses, proceeded to Fort Griffin, and reported the facts to the officer in command, who at once sent a detachment of dragoons in pursuit of them. They discovered that the band had divided into 2 parties, one of which had carried off the dead and wounded. Following the trail of this party, in a day or so they came to a fresh camp, in which they found several beds of grass covered with clots of blood. On a mound nearby, the bodies of 3 Indians were found. Other bodies were subsequently found, and on his return, the officer in command of this detachment of dragoons asserted that he was satisfied that Henry Dillard and his little brother Willie had killed and wounded 11 Indians in the fight, besides 5 horses left dead on the ground. So that's the end of this story. Quite an interesting story, the heroic defense of the Dillard brothers. So again, this occurred back in Young County all the way back in 1872. So if you want to hear more episodes like this, then be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Unworthy History.